Hello, every-many. We're the Crisses, and welcome to the 2026 Plural Positivity World Conference, and our session is Navigating the Attention Age, Social Media Shame, and Complex PTSD. This presentation is voiceover slides. All slide content is folded into our voiceover. We've been around a very long time. We're hermits living alone in upstate New York. We coach plural folk, which means they bring something to work on in the session, and we help them learn and use community and selves-help tools to remove obstacles and achieve their goals. So first, some disclaimers. We apologize in advance for things that we say that might not be universally true. We certainly don't intend to imply that our experience is everyone else's or that we know everything. We're too old to think we know everything. We welcome constructive feedback, and while we try to educate ourselves about our areas of weakness, no amount of educating ourselves will change that we are not those things. We will not apologize for mentioning and brushing up against political topics, and our political leanings are probably obvious in this session. We will criticize political and corporate greed, especially regarding social justice issues. We believe communication and shining a light in dark places we're reluctant to go is necessary to live in community. We're talking about some experiences that can be labeled as traumatizing in this session. Life has become increasingly complicated, and given intergenerational trauma, it's increasingly obvious that hurt caregivers need extra supports that society has not provided to meet the needs of their children in the most ideal way. We will be talking about traumatized people parenting children and trying not to shame or blame anything other than the systems in place that created these circumstances. Trauma shows up in many ways. We're not looking to vilify anyone. When we mention disorders or symptoms, it's to pull them under the umbrella of the traumatic experiences we're discussing. If you experience these things, please invite yourselves to feel included rather than ashamed or pushed out. It's alienating enough just to have trauma. When we talk about caregiver behavior, if you're a caregiver and are afraid you may have done some of those behaviors to your own children, take a deep breath and know that you're not alone. We Crisses have our heaping share of parental guilt and grief. We weigh that against doing the best we could with what we had available to us. Now that our kids are adults, we recommit to doing our best with what we have available and expanding what we have available to the best of our ability. Shame festers, so please come closer instead of pulling away. There are myriad ways we turn ourselves into pretzels to protect ourselves against the behavior of corporations and governments. That's where people may get together in a room and discuss out loud how to exploit populations of people both emotionally and economically. Or they note the systemic harms and let them slide because doing something right isn't profitable. Once we're more aware of these issues, we can decide whether to demand change or vote with our attention by putting it elsewhere. So, for this session, we're mainly addressing plural folk with relational trauma, but there are many issues here that affect everyone, singular or plural. If you can, it may be helpful to choose curiosity, choose feeling included, choose presence, and we hope that y'all will be patient with us as we meander through our thoughts and perspectives to take you on a little journey. First, where are we going? We're going to take a look at a variety of things through the lens of this is the attention age. It's not the only lens to view trauma, industry, or the world. We want to make the argument that the very human need for wholesome and soul-nurturing attention is clashing with the corporate-driven monetization of attention to help us recognize attention wounds so that they can be addressed thoughtfully and compassionately by ourselves and others. And most importantly, once we acknowledge and recognize that these wounds exist, Our internal and external communities can work on providing and seeking out safer types of attention that meet underlying needs rather than exacerbate our wounds. A little backstory. We Crisses grew up with attention neglect, but our nervous system interpreted, somewhat correctly, that we were seen as a burden, and we filled it with work to prove that we were not a burden. Our parental units both competed with us for attention, and we became very attention averse. Now we recognize that even while we unconsciously need attention, we also push it away because it hurts and it's confusing. We don't know how to process it or how to trust it. Our father, I think we can call them that, was plural. Their system kid wanted us to parent him. Their middles were jealous that we had more access to education, and they competed with us over having friends. We recognized their headmates had internal struggles with enmeshment with us, and they didn't realize their level of amnesia either. Their adults wanted to protect us, but were overprotective as a result. When they were physically absent, which happened often because they were the main wage earner in our family, our egg donor set us loose with no boundaries out of neglect rather than having a principled stance regarding free-range parenting. This became a common battleground between them. She was basically just glad to have us out of her hair, whether she was at work or home, and other parents in the neighborhood kept a closer watch on us and the other neighborhood kids than our own quote-unquote mother did. We no longer sought attention from our parents, the former being volatile and mercurial, the other being basically a ghost. And after some earlier years of getting decent attention from friends of the family, but feeling betrayed when they would leave us behind with our legal caregivers, we didn't feel comfortable with attention from other people either. So, back to today. We're not here to mask, fluff ourselves up, self-edit due to shame, or impress anyone with credentials. We're planning to make a real and imperfect presentation, leave in some of our flubs and mistakes, because it's okay to make mistakes. It proves we're human. We may switch mid-sentence, lose track, or interrupt ourselves. It's all good. We're amongst friends. Today's talk continues a trajectory of our last 3 presentations at this conference. We presented on shame and how to prevent shame triggering by building communities around belonging and inclusion in 2023. In 2024, we presented on presence as the opposite of dissociation. They aren't prerequisites for today's discussion at all. Why we're doing this? We seem to have a knack for discovering connections that aren't immediately obvious and helping people notice these sneaky things. Today, we're talking about some of these sneaky things. So recently, we had no idea what to present on this year. Then one day, we had shower thoughts. This being a time when our brain isn't focused on a particular problem, so we can bring up anything and anything. Our dissociative earworm was playing snatches of Metallica's 3 Unforgiven songs. These songs outline a pattern of trauma and trauma recovery. The first song is about the singer as a boy being coerced into the patriarchy's rules, who takes on carried shame and self-editing. Next song, he's experiencing relationship roller coasters because his trauma won't let him trust his partner, and his partner's trauma won't let them to trust him. In the third song, he is releasing carried shame, putting the shame back where it belongs with the abusers, and realizing he needs to forgive himself. We always link Metallica to a specific ex. So we're in the shower thinking about the trauma work journey in the songs and bouncing them against our ex's traits, wondering, is he able to hear this trauma journey in the songs? After a few minutes of struggling with the contrast of trauma progress and shedding intergenerational shame in the songs against the idea of how so many people are avoidant of introspection, our mind threw its mental hands up in frustration, asking, why are we surrounded by so many people with those traits in our day-to-day life? And what about society as a whole? and led us on this path. So the rest of the session, we'll be breaking down the cascade of thoughts, because concepts and mental pictures can require hundreds or thousands of words to convey. Basically, there was a bunch of puzzle pieces, and we were trying to figure out the bigger picture. It seems important to us. It's patterns we see in the world, that we see in our clients' lives, and that we see in our own. How many people in this community can trace our trauma back to one or more abusers who fit at least some symptoms of narcissism? You can't see it, but we're raising our hand. And we were thinking about how those commonly recognized quote-unquote narcissistic traits come about, which is to say that underneath those traits there are deep betrayal trauma wounds and attention starvation, stuff that we may all have in common. So this brought us to the cascade of thoughts we're sharing today in the hopes that noticing the wounds and how the 21st century is exacerbating them helps you bind and heal them. Note that we're not here to say narcissism is bad or people with these traits are inherently problematic. That's absolutely untrue. We're here to point out patterns and start a conversation about attachment, and more specifically, attention wounds. This is something DID has in common with other disorders. Our hope is that we can all understand this type of trauma, and by understanding it, be able to work on it. In order to heal a wound, we need to notice it first. To deal with carried shame, sometimes we need to recognize whose shame it really is in the first place, or at least that at the very root, it's not our own shame. When our wounds are from intergenerational harm, it has often been passed down between generations. Each generation is responsible for what they do, but they may also have been given less tools to take on that responsibility as well. So here's a brief introduction to how we view the impact of traumatic incidents on people. In medicine, the word trauma refers to the physical results, the wounds and the damage of a forceful impact. However, we're not limited to a physical body, which is why trauma can impact us, individual headmates or singular folks, mentally, emotionally, energetically, or spiritually. Just as physical trauma leaves us damaged, invisible trauma also damages us and can leave us wounded in a variety of ways. We may be missing a part of ourselves. We may be leaking. We may continue to feel the pain. We also may end up with a non-physical wound that festers and is essentially infected. Anytime we're wounded, regardless of the type of wound, we need to notice we got hurt in order to attend to the wound. Sometimes we were hurt by leaving parts of ourselves stuck in space and time, in the there and then or in trauma time. We talk about losing parts of ourselves all the time without realizing that it can be literal. For example, we might say we lost our self-esteem when we were a child. What if we went back to find it? When we're going through life with aching, open, invisible wounds, we'll look for ways to fill that painful emptiness. We may find makeshift stuff to fill it with if we can't reunite with what's actually missing. We used to wake up every day looking for people to help, to fill attachment wounds we got when we were a baby. That sounds okay until we ask whether those people asked for our help, or whether we may have micromanaged, pushed perfectionism, or infantilized anyone along the way in our enthusiasm. This brings us to the importance of attention and noticing in our healing journey. We can't replace a lost shirt button if we don't know it's missing. If we didn't notice our trauma, so we didn't notice how much we were falling over ourselves to prove our value in the world. Noticing requires attention, and nowadays almost everything wants our attention. So there's a lens about how to view traumatic impact, and there's a common sense fact that when we have a wound, we need to notice before we can clean it and put a Band-Aid on it. Noticing requires attention. If you wear glasses, You know, getting a new prescription can take some adjusting. It's challenging to develop a new lens through which to see things. We're going to put on new glasses to be able to scrutinize attention issues. Access to this new lens can be helpful for plurals because everyone needs attention, especially babies. Whether you accept or use this lens is optional, but it may be helpful to set aside other lenses briefly to prevent cognitive dissonance so you can put this new lens on for a bit, kind of like trying on glasses. It is not meant to replace other lenses through which you see the world. If you want to, you can use it when it's helpful and set it aside when it's not. For those of us who have trauma, some forms of attachment trauma are specifically around whether we get sufficient attention and the quality of that attention, which we frame as desirable versus undesirable. In spite of attention being a universal human need, society often absurdly scolds people for just seeking attention. And corporations have industrialized, monetized, and harvested attention for their advertisers and data collection, purposely handing us vapid and unsatisfying social media attention in the form of thumbs or likes, essentially tokenized attention in the place of the profound presence, attunement, and loving focus that we need and deserve. Having this lens can help you notice when attention is in play, what qualities the attention has, and whether there's competition over scarcity of attention, especially of quality attention. By the end of this talk, we'll share some actionable ways to apply the lens to evaluate your own or your system's collective attention issues and your system mate's needs to enable you to cultivate more satisfying internal and external attention. It's also notable that getting more satisfying attention and cultivating relationships with more heartfelt interactions can reduce shame and isolation, which helps with overall resilience. So let's define attention. What is attention? Attention is a quality of how we spend our time, where our focus is as that time is passing, and how we direct our energy, thoughts, and senses during that time. What we are paying attention to is the focal point of our time, energy, thoughts, and senses. We have a saying, time is my, or our, one finite commodity. Essentially, the here and now is our presence and attention being in this time and place. This moment, we only have this moment amount of time. This minute, we only have this minute of time. This is where our power to act is, in the here and now. We choose to be deliberate with how we spend our time, which also means where we focus our attention. We have attention issues. Not only us, within this community, with all our neurodiversity and quirks and losing time and dissociation and challenges, but the whole world has major attention issues. And in spite of promises or lies otherwise, it has not gotten any better over the last 200 years. Every time they're gonna roll out a new technology, they make promises that it's gonna free up all of our attention and time and energy to do the things we really want to do. Meanwhile, on the back end, they're actually finding new ways to tie up our time and attention and commodify some new skills they desperately need us for. We used to be paid for craft work and inventions, then for our labor on an assembly line. Then we were paid for sharing information and stories. Eventually, all those stories, programming code, journals that we wrote on the internet became a vehicle by way of endless short-form postings in aggregate, carrying advertising on the front end and selling data about us and especially about our interests and attention on the back end. Social media became the best example of, if you're getting something for free, then you're the product. We have all this information in one place on the internet. Now what do we do with it? They don't really need us to produce so much information anymore. The internet juggernaut is churning out plenty of information on its own. So they're dangling that same transitionary promise in front of us again. Give up on your desk job. We're building the machines that will free humanity so that everybody won't have to work anymore. We'll pay you to fold clothes on camera so our robots can learn how to do household tasks. It's all a lie because they've upped the ante again. So the information age gives way to the attention age, even as the words paying attention to imply that attention is able to be quantified and commoditized, usually tracked as time without distraction. What do we pay attention to? Advertisers want to make sure we see their ads because they're paying the platforms a lot of money to guarantee our attention. Sponsored listings and posts in our feeds and sponsored videos, ad breaks, and more. The information has grown to the size that people can no longer absorb and process it, so we've made machines, LMMs, or AIs, that process massive amounts of information for us and spit out capsules of that information at us, backed by massive investment vehicles, all whittling away at the world's energy resources and our individual privacy and security. So let's get back to trauma and how this all weaves together. We have been experiencing a systemic erosion of attention, especially individualized attention given to young children, generation on generation for the last 200 years or so. Obviously, not every child was getting enough or healthy attention all along, but we're talking in broad brushstrokes about societal trends and about intergenerational trauma. This affects how each generation parents their own children. Corporations and the economic engine are harvesting attention in ways that compete with the social caregiving contract. It's become systemically harder to provide the individualized attention that young, dependent children actually need to flourish. Our society bundles up groups of children into one place and pays people to pay attention to a whole herd of children. All too often, attention-starved children come home to exhausted caregivers whose tank is empty. This means more people than we might think have attention wounds. Companies are comprised of people. People make choices on what to monetize, hoard, invest in, or trade. When we look at this intergenerational pattern, we can't help but think that these unfulfilled needs drive the corporation's frenzy to monopolize and harvest our attention. In the past, corporations hoarded materials, manufacturing, resources, labor. Now they're scrambling to hoard airwaves, media channels, advertising space, and data. The U.S. has unleashed corporations. The EU is scrambling to put up defenses and untether. But in terms of what we see going on, many people at the top have massive attention trauma. They're hangry for attention. How long it takes young to mature varies in the mammal kingdom. Deer get up very quickly and run around. Kangaroos' Joey spends 1 month inside and 6 months in the pouch before they're ready to emerge. Elephants take almost 2 years inside and are born ready to move around and learn how to feed themselves. Humans are born half-baked in comparison, completely helpless, unable to even locate, prepare, and eat our own food for years. We quadruple our brain size in the first 5 years. Society and tools make everything more complicated to learn as well. It's hard enough to eat with our hands. We need to use utensils. We are notably helpless and immature when we're born. Humans take a long time to achieve adulthood and require dedicated care, followed by a gradual expansion of responsibilities and freedoms, especially in a complicated world. This requires non-negotiable attention, especially at the start of the journey. Society's implicit caregiving contract requires that caregivers attend to a growing child's needs. By attend to, it automatically means they are required to give a child attention. This brings us to the early attachment term attunement, which is what a child experiences when their caregiver fills their needs. The caregiver pays attention. They engage their senses over time with the child to anticipate needs the child cannot communicate yet. One example is differentiated crying. After a couple of months, a baby begins to cry differently for different needs. This cry for hunger, that cry for pain. When the caregiver responds to this early communication by understanding the difference, the baby learns that vocal communication is an effective way to get their needs met. Fast forward to toddlers. This is when babies are becoming more mobile and developing bare bones language skills. And they also become very sensitized to attention. One moment a toddler is happily playing independently, so it seems like a good time to call a friend. A couple minutes later, the child is melting down and demanding attention. Caregivers can't explain what is safe or unsafe to a toddler. At this age, mobility outpaces judgment. An unattended child is at risk of accidents or being too far away for a caregiver to intervene. We consider it a survival instinct for that toddler to ensure that someone is paying close attention to them while they're exploring. In evolutionary terms, this means that a caregiver can stop a child from eating a poison berry or swiftly intervene when there's danger. It's natural to crave and demand attention when attention is necessary for survival. That toddler's instincts are a good thing. Coming back around to our community, it makes sense that some headmates need a lot of attention. Certainly infant and toddler headmates, and also trauma holders who may have attention and attachment wounds. At the same time, attention wounds aren't limited to people in our community. So we can also find attention craving and seeking behaviors amongst co-conscious adult headmates and singular folks who have had attachment ruptures. It can be important to note that the youngest and most helpless headmates need intense and dedicated attention, such as an infant being carried in a sling, or a toddler may need to be held often or carried around throughout the day. We believe this level of care is easiest to get in the inner world, as it may be inappropriate to seek the every waking hour level of attention that babies and toddlers need from external folks. We talk about that topic more in our reparenting content. We're defining attention ruptures as a subset of attachment trauma for the sake of this presentation. These ruptures may show up when we've experienced negative or abusive attention starvation, or what our nervous system might perceive as a bait and switch type of attention betrayal. These are just extreme examples of things that lead to trauma around attention. There's different ways it can show up. We may avoid any attention, fail to recognize when we're getting desirable attention, or have a love-hate relationship with attention. Some folks will seek attention at all costs and implode or explode when it's withdrawn. And of course, all of the gray areas in between. Complex PTSD, also known as C-PTSD, is a big umbrella of people with relational trauma, also known as betrayal trauma. The disorders under the umbrella of complex PTSD include dissociative disorders and personality disorders such as BPD. When we frame this as betrayal trauma, it begs the question of what was betrayed? A baby is born into the world with very few instincts and a lot of needs, but also no particular expectations. So we frame this as the betrayal of the social contract to meet the needs of a new human. When this contract is upheld reasonably well, the people filling it are generally called caregivers. Not all of us have experienced attention trauma from our primary caregivers. Having experienced attention trauma, we broadly think of it as showing up in 3 different ways. We can be targeted with undesirable attention, our attention needs can be neglected entirely, or we might be getting desirable attention and then lose it. Of course, these are convenient milestones to talk about. There's all kinds of experiences in between and a mix of all of them. For example, sometimes we got very desirable attention from one of our caregivers, but other times that same caregiver gave us very undesirable attention. So we learned that we can't trust the people who care about us. As we mentioned earlier, when someone is traumatized, there's an impact that breaks off a part of themselves. Not only did we learn that we can't trust the people who care about us, We had to hide away the part of us that needed their care so it wouldn't be re-traumatized over and over. Some trauma comes from attention neglect, and a child may leave behind their sense of being worthy of attention. Also, when someone loses healthy, wholesome attention, someone who had it long enough to trust it and feel they deserved it, and then it's replaced with dangerous or undesirable attention, there's a "what did I do to deserve this?" Maybe they feel robbed of the attention that they deeply deserved, angry because the situation is unjust and frustrating, or they may be rageful, that especially if they're too young to express their alarm that everything went upside down for them. We call it betrayal trauma when one was getting what they needed and then it was withdrawn. All of these situations leave attention wounds. The urges change depending on the meaning and the learning that we take from these situations. And as a result, what parts of ourselves we lost or had to leave behind may be different. What's similar across all of them is that there are these wounds, and the instinct is to fill them with something. Self-editing, that's to say, the process of leaving a part of ourselves or our identity out of our interactions, is a shame-based behavior. The fear is that a part of ourselves isn't acceptable in community, so we protect ourselves by leaving that part of ourselves out of our interactions. While some folks compete for attention, some folks hog attention, some of us leave our attention-hungry parts in the closet. We self-edit so that we're smaller, we take up less space, we may be secretly hoping to get some desirable attention, but we don't dare compete for it, ask for it, because our trauma tells us that it's dangerous to get attention. In the plural community, we may discuss patterns of caregiving. In some cases, we're responding to intergenerational attention trauma, as our caregivers may have had their own attention wounds. When a person is pregnant, they get a lot more attention than usual. If the person with the attention wounds is pregnant, this is a flood of attention supply that may soothe their wounds temporarily. If the person with the attention wounds is not the pregnant person, they may try to compete for that pregnancy attention. And once the baby is born, either will experience a vacuum of attention, as babies often take the spotlight. These dynamics are no fault of the new child. They're intergenerational wounds getting stirred up. But they can infest the whole caregiving dynamic. Social expectations say that it's obvious that pregnant people and babies need additional attention, yet the sudden withdrawal of attention from a caregiver with betrayal wounds can be re-traumatizing. Going against broad social expectations can add unconscious layers of shame into the dynamic. This conflict can lead to dysregulation and undesirable behavior, even more shame, self-editing, and guilt. Yet, the wounded adult also needs attention, has never gotten enough attention to ride on reserves. Their tank is never full. And all too often this becomes a competition for scarce resources. Wounds that may have been healed in a more wholesome community with plenty attention to spare are unable to find resources in our current attention economy. Some of the world's richest people barely ever get into the news, but some are always in the headlines. They suck the attention air out of everything they touch. Their wounds will never be healed by new attention cravings because they're not addressing the origin story. It's like they're looking for the kryptonite, the vast transitory applause, news headlines, and social media boosts, forgetting that they lost their parents on Krypton. One might say the wounds lie and say any attention is better than no attention at all, but they misbehave and act out of control just to take up space in the discourse. Some may crave and compete for attention. Some may run away from attention. Yet others will be entirely ambivalent to their own needs. Some people will hog up all the attention. Don't look at them, look at me. Or we won't recognize the need to pay attention, or even know how to pay attention. So some of us traumatized folk in the community are that baby. We had one or both parents competing with us for the attention we needed. They ran off with the loaf of bread and left us with crumbs. Attention is being co-opted, diverted, weaponized, monetized, and colonized. Attention now drives profits. Who the customer is and what they really want have taken a backseat to whether they'll pay attention to the ads. Next, they wanted to monitor where our gaze is while we're on their platform to make sure that we're paying attention to the ads. For example, they're going after gamers and portions of the gaming industry. Because, of course, if you're immersed in a game, they can't monetize your attention on social media. So instead, they change games to pump money out of our accounts with subscriptions, microtransactions, loot boxes, or paid ads. Manipulation of attention is another insidious part of the art of propaganda. Once they know where your attention is and what most successfully captures it, they can practice how to successfully divert it. YouTube, as an example, has some good content often dressed up or buried in very misleading and inflammatory titles. Sometimes these attractive video titles are outright lies, or don't even relate to the content inside the videos at all. This is a guaranteed unsubscribe or even a block from us. The systems of misinformation that allow propaganda to propagate include diverting our attention, just as sleight of hand tricks make people look at one hand while the other executes the deception. We as a society can't afford to reward this behavior, yet the extra vigilance is exhausting. Another clear case of society weaponizing and monetizing attention is with neurodivergence, most specifically ADHD. ADHD is not anywhere near the same problem in a world where we are unchained from clocks and given ample access to interesting things by our own definition. However, there is a clear and unrelenting pressure to do things at specific times and in specific ways with no creative wiggle room. Being told what to look at, how to sit, whether we can move, what to think about, what to read, what to memorize, what to write about, etc. These are never the strong suit of the mind that wants to explore, make new connections, discover new things, and bring their freshest ideas into existence. I'm pretty sure there have been people with the traits we call ADHD since before recorded history. Tinkerers and craftspeople, inventors, dreamers, and authors. However, since the Industrial Revolution, we've expected people to sit still and learn the right way. The right way being the modern educational system, where basically the same group of kids levels up collectively regardless of their interests or talents. Children being trained out of all creativity and being taught to rote memorize boring facts. In the mid-19th century, John Dewey was enamored of the idea of bringing most children up through this process that grinds people down to a nubbin, so our country would have tame and obedient factory workers and soldiers. They wanted unquestioning obedience to authority and minimal competence. Suffice to say, rich kids get a very different educational system. More centering of interests, more vetting for hidden talents, more art appreciation, travel, exploration. Where necessity is the mother of invention, they give the widest berth to the people who need nothing at all. After 170-ish years of the current educational system, added to increased attention starvation at home and escalating corporate demands to harvest working class attention, enter ADHD to the insurance billing manual with medications to help us fit in and diagnoses to allay shame. Treatments can prepare wayward individuals to re-enter the attention monetization pipeline. I mean school and work. When anything interferes with society benefiting from a person's labor, it is labeled as a disability or deficit. Society created ADHD and also puts the responsibility on the individual to comply with treatment rather than society making accommodations and enjoying the rich benefits of human diversity. Note, we're all for you choosing your treatments and your pathway. We're addressing how society has created problems and how society coerces certain solutions. This is nothing about individual choices from the options presented. We love options. We also have a problem with shame and coercion. Speaking about shame and coercion, no discussion about society and attention in the current zeitgeist would be complete without talking briefly about trans issues, which, like ADHD and attachment issues, are close to our community's heart. We're taking a high-level approach here because once we get our boots out of the muck and view it from higher ground, this whole conversation gets more absurd. The U.S. is pretty uptight about bodies, body diversity, and a lot of shame around bodily functions. It's interesting that the powers that be insist on weaponizing what junk people have, whether they've chosen to have surgery on their junk, and which room they choose to eliminate stuff from their junk. Very absurd. There's now this huge legislative war over whether people are trans, which really ought to not be anybody's business except a patient and their doctor. But pronoun use made people's bigotry very public, and obviously they were ashamed of showing their bigotry in public and needing to be continually corrected because it was too much work for them to swap around some words. So now there's this knee-jerk response to attack trans rights in the public square, to punish everyone for having corrected bigots' pronoun use and questioning their closed-mindedness. This is leading to dystopian absurdity, to legislate examining children's private parts to make sure everyone uses the correctly labeled room to eliminate in, protecting children in name only, because it's been quite obvious that just about the only thing they've done in the last 170 years to actually protect children are the child labor laws they're also actively working to dismantle. Once we're talking about politicians and legislators and lying directly to our face, we should talk about Darvo. Every example in this mind-blowing mess is about weaponizing attention. It's part of the deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. For their counterattack to succeed, it needs to draw more attention than what they're distracting from. And they felt targeted. In the trans example, they flipped the script from focusing on their bigotry and intolerance to scrutinizing and inserting themselves into patient-doctor privilege, the hard choices families make, and whether folks need their documentation and ID corrected. Purely private matters now on the stage for all to scrutinize. They make it everyone's problem and open it to attack. Make a case for incursions into people's private information and medical decisions by way of what? A need to sort kids by how they eliminate waste products. It's a how dare you externalized response to their own shame. They put us on the defensive, push to cede ground and take back gains earned over 60 years, and their bonus round is gaining convenient scapegoats to misdirect from their misdeeds. There's a lot more we could say, but to keep it about attention issues in the zeitgeist and less the politics behind it, we cannot cede ground and give up rights that were hard won. Part of the purpose of exposing the attention age, including the misdirection and distractions, is how they're attacking the most vulnerable people on purpose because it actually matters, and they know we will expend energy on it. And they're right. It's our job to notice that while this hand is waving around here, the other is doing something much more nefarious. Given how high the stakes are, it's important to figure out what they're distracting from. All that to come back to the twisted stuff going on in our own relatively small corner of the world here in the DID community. The same knee-jerk reactions are taking place here, on a much smaller stage than the huge political arena, but nonetheless important, and it impacts our community. The same pressures exist to make us all into good little soldiers and workers, in spite of our community spanning the full range of productive wage earners through to absolutely unable to work. We're pushed to consume content, allowing them to harvest our data, to monetize our attention, to get us on our feet and off public health, and to consume products in spite of having some really long-term issues and a prognosis that generally says, not anytime soon. The plural self-help community is sometimes perceived as being in direct competition with the licensed expert community. And yet, we, the coaches, the therapists, the practitioners in the refractory, and many of y'all in the audience, prove them wrong every single day. How many of us do self-help alongside therapy? And many of us would never do therapy again because of trauma with therapists. And as a result, self or selves-help is the pathway that's available to us. As a coach, many of our clients also have one or more other members on their professional support team, usually at least one licensed therapist, sometimes more than one. It took a village to break most of us, and when we're able to cobble together a support team, it can be helpful to have a team to help us get back on our feet, inside and outside teams even. So we find it odd that there are some organizations of licensed professionals who see self-help and professionals like us as an enemy. This isn't a competition. People's lives are on the line. Imagine if one person in a rescue squad said, "No, I've got this. I want to save everyone myself." When there's a rescue squad, everyone gets a role and works together to save lives. It only makes sense if they need some sort of congratulations, a pat on the back, some kind of superhero complex, some type of gold medal for saving people. That sounds like a problem they may want to work on with a coach or a therapist, because we're not in the business of fixing anyone. Every plural system, no matter how hurt, no matter how reactive, no matter how triggered, is a unique and beautiful assemblage of nerves and potential. Those nerves may be bound up tight and protective and knotted up, and the goal is to become safe enough for it all to unfurl like a flower and bloom so everyone can see some of that inner beauty. And yeah, that means you too, the one who thinks that we can't possibly be talking about you with the thorns and the pain and the screaming inside, you too. So it doesn't make sense to us, unless those trauma industry gatekeepers who are so afraid that they refuse to work with empowered clients who do self-help work, or who refuse to work with someone who mentions community catchphrases like healthy multiplicity, or who make entire presentations in white papers about content creators being fakers or vying for attention on social media. It doesn't make sense unless they're somehow needing to justify their existence by saving people. They need their pedestals, awards, recognition, limelight, notches on their belt for how many people they've saved. We see a hypocritical lack of professionalism if someone is standing on a stage being accusing about people they've never met, who aren't in the room, saying they're faking being disabled. So given all of these ideas and thoughts that children absolutely do need attention, that so many people have had attachment and attention wounds that they're still wounded as adults and compete with their children for attention, or perhaps don't even comprehend how to dish out satisfying and nutritious attention to their children, yet we also need to examine that the system, the government, media, corporations demand our attention on the job and in our leisure time to monopolize and monetize it, only to then decry that needy children and wounded adults ought to just be satisfied with the measly scraps of attention left over after they grind it up to spit out money. The problem isn't seeking attention. Don't most people? Well, at least we do if we haven't been traumatized out of seeking attention. We're making the case that there's far more hypocrisy going on when someone stands on a stage with their PowerPoint or publishes white papers claiming that plurals on social media who they never met must be faking and just seeking attention. Why do we find this hypocritical? Because that person is competing for attention too, aren't they? Don't look at them. Look at me. It's a reenactment of the tyrant, the expert, the patriarch, the dominant colonizer of attention, telling their wee victims to sit down, shut up, be quiet, and wait till they are handed some scraps of attention. It's infantilizing. It puts us into the children should be seen, not heard category. Quit monkeying around. We would think the so-called experts understand that power and control issues are part of the abuse that creates childhood wounds. Isn't that why we seek out therapy and treatment? Let's say for just a moment that someone is faking DID for attention. Then they have attention wounds as well, probably trauma from early childhood, and they also need help. They're our brethren in a disability sense, not our enemy. It's not likely that they're doing it consciously. They probably believe they're plural. That's not faking at all then. That's being mistaken, misdiagnosed, perhaps factitious disorder. Then they deserve treatment, not shame from an expert. A bit of a rhetorical question. Why would an expert feel a need to make an example of disabled people? We could guess, but we don't know for sure. Doesn't sound healthy, though. That sort of punching down is unbecoming. So, back to our community. In essence, there's a problem of being told whether or how to seek attention, even though everyone needs it. It doesn't matter whether we're plural or not, or which industry is trying to control our access to when, where, or why we seek attention. It's become commonplace that systems and society punish people for pushing back. The majority of us are socializing on social media in ways that allow them to spy on our interactions, and they harvest our data in exchange for us getting fleeting attention that doesn't last. There's a lot of dynamics in the quality of attention we get. We get attention from a grocery clerk, probably distracted and transitory, although I guess it might be their full and undivided attention. If we hit the jackpot, it might even be loving in a neighborly, inviting, and sort of universal love way. It might change our mood, lift our day, but it's not likely to rock our world to its foundations and seal up old wounds. Just for purposes of illustration, we've mentioned some extreme set points on a spectrum of attention. On one end, there's fleeting attention. It's pretty empty, done with complete anonymous strangers we may never bump into again. There's no lasting connections. It rarely has any heartfelt connection. Any effects are brief, and it usually happens at a high risk of being shamed or ridiculed in the same environment, because there's almost zero consequences for dishing out negativity. If we're looking for attention in these fast-paced environments, it can get addicting. Scrolling endlessly and hitting like buttons, saying our witticisms, hoping it stirs up a little reaction. There's a low barrier of entry. It's very easy to self-edit in these environments. Fleeting attention traps, such as social media, are set for humanity as a whole. Every like is not only a boost for dopamine, it's also a sign of getting something attention adjacent, but without actually taking any consequential attention away from the ads on the platform. And it's not the attention we really need or seek out, is it? On the other side of the spectrum, we have hearty attention. This is warm, welcoming, inclusive, and it reduces shame. People at least try to be present with you. They're really interested. Folks are connecting. If you ever had an experience of someone being profoundly present and attentive in a non-threatening way, that's what we're talking about. Even though that experience might make us upset or uncomfortable because we don't know what to do with it or how to process that much attention, that discomfort from that might be shame, or it might be touching a raw, sore place where trauma is. Goals around all of this is going to be up to y'all's system. We think things like, how can we navigate this landscape safely and get more hearty and lasting attention? Especially given our community's additional needs and vulnerabilities, how can we recognize the quality of attention we experience? How can we recognize our needs? How can we get appropriate attention? Do we want to get it from our inner community or external community? What types of attention should we avoid? We're not advocating for getting hooked in to people who weaponize attention. Most of the time when we get hearty attention, it will be from one-to-one conversations, taking turns and trading off attention, something of a rhythm, like a tennis match. This is a pattern that language specialists find even in babies, and it seems to be a normal form of exchanging attention with others. I make a funny face, the baby responds with a smile or a giggle, then I respond to the baby, and we go back and forth. We're likely on the autism spectrum, While we find that sort of simple pattern makes sense, we often misread cues and don't know when to respond or join into an exchange. Funnily, we seem to do better with other neurodivergent folks and plurals, but reading invitations and opportunities gets more awkward with neurotypical people. We can talk among our peers and our headmates far more easily than with the average person, especially when the exchange is hearty rather than fleeting. We enjoy talking about topics of either person's interest, and we enjoy small talk much less. A whole other topic is how to engage with people with less shame sensitivity, which goes back to our 2023 talks, one on shame and the other on belonging and inclusion. In short, shame is a group of fears that monitor threats to belonging, inclusion, rank, and status. When these are not under threat, when the conversation is about coming together, being supportive of each other, when it increases closeness, the conversation has a lower chance of triggering shame spirals. One caution on the topic of getting our attention needs met. Please do be aware that people with attention wounds can be manipulated and exploited by individuals and groups who use attention, belonging, and overly enthusiastic inclusion as bait. It's probably a good idea to become familiar with warning signs and to have internal agreements and boundaries around protecting your system. It's unfortunate that people use others' need for attention to hook them into toxic relationships. We're getting ready to wrap this up, so here's our starter ideas for how to improve the quality of attention we get individually and collectively as a system and community. In terms of healing progress, we can dedicate some attention in the form of noticing towards our own issues, trauma, emotions, experiences. For example, we cannot heal a wound if we don't even notice it. To attend to our wounds requires attention. Work on building up the ability to stay present for a while in order to give more focused attention to external world relationships, projects, and artwork. It's important to give attention towards both our inner world, our headmates, and equally to attend to the external world, our relationships and responsibilities there too. It takes a balance. Both are important. You don't have to see your inner world to pay attention to what's going on there. Experiment with analog time. Where are places y'all can spend more time together as a system, or sit with your own thoughts? We could talk amongst ourselves while washing the dishes instead of watching a video. Start to notice when someone needs attention and is seeking a rapid fix, so that you can nudge towards more satisfying methods that provide more genuine belonging and individualized personal attention. Occasionally trade doom scrolling for a chat or a phone call. As we notice and reclaim our own attention, we can spread it out among our headmates and give more appropriate attention to younger headmates or trauma holders. The younger they are, the more dedicated attention they need. Choose where to spend more time by which platforms or interactions provide heartier attention versus the experiences and platforms that leave you unfulfilled, ashamed, lonely, or drained. Consider having an explicit attention exchange with a good friend or a smaller group of peers. Support groups are a good place for more mature headmates to participate in turn-taking and tolerating focused attention. Hopefully by now, y'all are able to try on your new attention-attuned lenses and see places that the attention economy, including on the interpersonal and intrapersonal, corporate, and social media scales, might affect y'all's life. We've talked about attention wounds, some ways that they show up, and some of the ways that we can address them more compassionately in both ourselves and others. Here in the attention age, it's important to be aware of the factors that are vying for our attention and to be able to steer clear of weaponized attention to protect ourselves and to seek out hearty, healthy, and more desirable attention. Our CV is at crisses.org if anyone needs a list of what we've done or accomplished, or all of our websites. We're here to help y'all see things you might never have seen, notice things y'all might not otherwise notice, and to help seed thoughts that might help shorten your recovery journey. Thank you for coming to our session.